The hills of Caracas echo tonight with the rhythm of marching boots and the hum of distant aircraft. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has declared that his country's national defense plan is now fully activated across all 23 states. A sweeping military readiness posture, he says, is aimed at countering what he calls U.S. threats along Venezuela's borders and coasts. Over the past week, thousands of soldiers, reservists and civilian militia members have fanned out across the countryside, from the lush plains of Guarico and Cojedes to the farmlands of Barinas and Portuguesa. Venezuelan units have been conducting synchronized maneuvers. Maduro says this marks the completion of the integral defense zones, a network of regional commands designed to coordinate land, air and coastal protection. In his televised address from Caracas, Maduro looked directly into the cameras, defiant and composed. Today, they're releasing the news that they don't have diplomatic relations with us, nor do we with them, he said. Do we have any channels of communication? Well, we have them until we have them, that's it. The day we don't have them, period. Life doesn't depend on you. Venezuela doesn't depend on you, gentlemen gringos. Behind him, a formation of troops stood in crisp rows. Farmers, students and local militiamen waved the red, blue and yellow national flag. Maduro's words were punctuated by the low thump of helicopter rotors passing overhead, part of the country's week-long military drills, now expanded nationwide. These exercises, which began earlier in October, follow the U.S. Navy's deployment of 7 warships to the Caribbean under what Washington described as an anti-narcotics operation. One of those vessels, the guided missile cruiser USS Lake Erie, was filmed crossing the Pedro Miguel locks of the Panama Canal, a powerful image of American naval reach. But in Caracas, officials view the deployment differently. They call it an act of intimidation. Part of what they allege is a long-term campaign to force regime change. State media reported that Venezuelan radar and coastal units have been tracking U.S. movements in nearby international waters. The government claims that 6 narco-terrorist vessels, suspected drug smuggling boats, were struck by U.S. forces in recent weeks, leaving at least 27 people dead. Washington has not confirmed the figure, but insists its actions are part of a multinational effort to dismantle criminal trafficking networks operating out of Latin America. Maduro, however, says the timing and scale of the U.S. operation shows something larger is at play. His defense ministry has announced the mobilization of 17,000 troops near the Colombian border, alongside police, civil protection brigades, and a newly trained civilian defense corps. Footage released by state television shows Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello marching with farmers and volunteers through muddy rural roads, leading chants of Patria o Muerte, homeland or death. He is seen inspecting field training, supervising rifle drills, and standing shoulder to shoulder with villagers who have been incorporated into local militia units. The government calls these forces defenders of territorial sovereignty. Critics at home and abroad call them propaganda, exercises meant to showcase strength more than readiness. But for many ordinary Venezuelans, the sight of armed civilians practicing maneuvers has become an increasingly familiar scene. Over the weekend, Maduro appeared again on national television, this time during a meeting of the National Council for Sovereignty and Peace in Caracas. Surrounded by generals, he spoke with a mix of pride and anger. "Until when will the CIA carry out coups?" he asked, his voice rising. "Latin America does not want them, does not need them, and rejects them." His remarks came just days after US President Donald Trump confirmed that he had authorized certain CIA operations targeting Venezuela. Speaking to reporters in Washington, Trump hinted at broader options on the table. "Well, I don't want to tell you exactly," he said, when asked whether land strikes were being considered, "but we're certainly looking at land right now because we have the sea pretty well under control. We've had a couple of days where there isn't a boat to be found." That statement, brief but unmistakable, rippled through Latin American capitals. Within hours, Venezuelan media amplified it as proof that Washington was preparing a direct intervention. In contrast, US officials framed Trump's comments as part of his broader maximum pressure strategy, a mix of sanctions, surveillance, and selective operations aimed at curbing what the White House calls narco-state activities by Maduro's inner circle. The Venezuelan leader has used those remarks to rally domestic support, portraying the standoff as a national struggle for sovereignty. In speeches, he often invokes the legacy of Simón Bolivar, drawing parallels between 19th century independence wars and the modern confrontation with the United States. "This is our moment of unity," he told crowds in Caracas earlier this month, "the moment to defend our right to exist without imperial dictates." Meanwhile, analysts note that the timing of these maneuvers is politically significant. Venezuela faces growing internal strains. Inflation remains among the highest in the world. Food and medicine shortages persist, and international sanctions have severely restricted oil exports. Yet Maduro's approval ratings have inched upward in recent months, buoyed by nationalist rhetoric and visible displays of military solidarity. Satellite images reviewed by regional observers show increased Venezuelan troop concentrations near the Colombian border, especially around the Táchira region. Military convoys have also been spotted moving along the Orinoco River basin, an area rich in gold and strategic minerals but prone to armed group activity. In neighboring Colombia, officials are watching closely. Bogotá's defense ministry has confirmed an uptick in troop alerts but insists it has no plans for confrontation. Privately, Colombian analysts worry that any miscalculation could trigger cross-border incidents, given the proximity of armed militias and irregular groups along the frontier. In the Caribbean, U.S. naval patrols have continued uninterrupted. The Pentagon says the mission, officially described as an anti-narcotic surge, involves intelligence gathering, interdiction of smuggling routes, and coordination with regional partners. But the choice of vessels, including missile-equipped destroyers and advanced reconnaissance aircraft, underscores a message of deterrence as much as enforcement. Back in Caracas, Maduro has doubled down on his denunciations of what he calls imperial aggression. His government released drone footage showing militia exercises in La Guaira, a coastal region overlooking the Caribbean. The images show hundreds of civilians practicing evacuation drills, firing blanks from assault rifles, and marching behind banners that read, "Venezuela Soberana, Venezuela en Paz." To many in the region, it's a sign of how far the crisis has evolved from an economic struggle into a geopolitical flashpoint. The rhetoric on both sides has sharpened. Maduro accuses Washington of orchestrating cyber attacks and energy sabotage. U.S. officials accuse Caracas of harboring cartel networks and partnering with foreign intelligence agencies hostile to American interests. Diplomatic channels between the two nations are virtually frozen. The U.S. embassy in Caracas remains closed. Venezuelan diplomats operate largely from Mexico City and Havana. International mediators, including representatives from Brazil and the United Nations, have quietly urged restraint. So far, neither side shows signs of backing down. For Venezuelans, daily life unfolds against this backdrop of tension. In the streets of Caracas, the sight of uniformed soldiers directing traffic or guarding public buildings has become routine. Government supporters describe the exercises as a festival of sovereignty. Opposition figures call them a show of force built on fear. Economists warn that the militarization of the country's internal life could further erode investor confidence and deter humanitarian engagement. Yet Maduro's administration insists that the defense plan, officially named Plan Bolivar 2025, is purely preventive, aimed at securing borders, defending energy infrastructure, and maintaining what it calls strategic deterrence. The plan involves not only the regular armed forces, but also the Bolivarian militia, a force of hundreds of thousands of volunteers trained for local defense. They operate under regional commanders and often collaborate with civilian authorities in logistics, communications, and community security. As night falls over Caracas, state television broadcasts images of searchlights sweeping across the sky, illuminating columns of vehicles moving toward remote training camps. The soundtrack is patriotic. Drums, horns, and the echo of Maduro's earlier declaration. "Life does not depend on you," he had said. "Venezuela does not depend on you, gringos." In Washington, analysts debate whether Trump's comments were a deliberate escalation or a calculated bluff. Some see them as an attempt to pressure Maduro into concessions ahead of potential talks over sanctions relief. Others believe the administration genuinely views Venezuela as a security threat, a nexus of drug trafficking, corruption, and foreign military influence. For now, the standoff remains rhetorical but volatile. Each side feeds off the other's defiance. Maduro presents every US statement as validation of his resistance narrative. US officials point to every Venezuelan maneuver as proof of authoritarian militarization. On social media, hashtags like hashtag Defensa Bolivariana and hashtag Hands Off Venezuela trend alongside footage of naval patrols and militia marches. For Maduro's base, this is a moment of patriotic pride. For critics, a dangerous game of brinkmanship. Regional observers warn that even a single misstep, an intercepted vessel, a border clash, a misidentified aircraft, could ignite a wider confrontation. Both nations are armed, alert, and politically invested in showing strength. As dawn approaches, the lights of the Caribbean shimmer beyond Venezuela's northern coast. The USS Lake Erie continues its steady patrol, a grey silhouette cutting through calm waters. On the mainland, Maduro's forces drill under the rising sun, chanting the same refrain carried through the valleys: Venezuela soberana, Venezuela libre. Whether this new defense activation is a show of sovereignty or a symptom of deeper insecurity depends on who you ask. What's clear is that the small towns of the Venezuelan interior, from Caracas to Barinas, have once again become the stage for a contest of global wills. In the words of one soldier interviewed by state TV, "We train so that no foreign power decides our future." And for President Maduro, that sentiment is the point. The line between deterrence and provocation grows thinner by the day. And in the Caribbean twilight, both Caracas and Washington seem prepared to test just how thin it can get.